Imagine a world where the sun hasn't risen for years, where the ground trembles beneath the weight of giants, where humans live not in cities, but in fear, not in the light, but in shadow. This is not fantasy. This is the world where humans and dinosaurs coexist. And tonight you'll walk in it. Backhand index pointing down before we begin. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that plunge you deep into the survival of the human spirit. The sky was never meant to stay dark, and yet it did. In this world, not our world, but one that nearly was, the sky never fully healed. The sun rose weaker after the Great Tilt, a cataclysm not of fire but of silence. No asteroid burned through the heavens. No extinction burst forth in flame. The dinosaurs did not die. The planet simply leaned, tilted on its axis by a cosmic tremor, a shift so slow, so ancient, it escaped the memory of even the oldest stones. What followed was not ice, but shadow. A slow, permanent dusk fell over the earth. And in that dark, something improbable happened. Humans evolved, and they survived. This was the genesis of the shadow world. The jungles returned first, dense, wet, steaming. Swamps crawled back over continents. Volcanoes whispered to the sky. And through this humid veil, titanic shapes moved. Some walked, some ran, some flew. They did not know fear. They were the old blood, the rulers of bone and claw. In a world choked by vines and mist, they were kings without challengers. Until something smaller stirred beneath them. Something soft-skinned. Something that breathed quickly, dreamed dangerously. Something that carried fire. The first humans did not know their place. They were born into hiding, raised beneath stone shelves and inside root-choked hollows. They whispered in the dark, never fully sure whether the thunder they heard in the night came from sky or from footstep. The land was always moving. The earth trembled with the weight of beasts. Trees cracked under passing tails. Screeches echoed across canyons. It was not a question of food or shelter. It was a question of survival, every minute, every hour. This was not evolution by conquest. It was evolution by escape. They did not build cities. They could not. The land did not allow permanence. They learned instead to move like the wind, to scatter like ash. Campsites vanished at dawn. Sleeping places changed every week. Caves were not homes. They were graves if chosen poorly. But humans are patient. They watched. They studied the patterns. And they remembered. They began to name the creatures, not with science, but with song and warning. The backbreaker, for the Tyrannosaurus. The grey wing, for the silent pterosaurs that plucked goats from mountaintops. The 1,000 eyes, for the packs of velociraptors whose green stare turned men to stone. They told stories, not because they were bored, but because survival required memory. A child who did not learn the difference between a herbivore's tail and a carnivore's silhouette did not see their next season. Myth was a manual. Every lie had truth stitched inside. They used what they had. Fire was not just warmth. It was God. It was the only thing the giants feared. Flames kept the night creatures at bay. Smoke disguised scent. Ash marked the paths home. In the dark, even a single coal was power. Children learned to carry embers wrapped in moss, passing it hand to hand like treasure. A tribe without fire was already dead. And still, the world tried to kill them. Storms came hard. Rains that fell for days turned jungles into oceans. Lizards the size of trees would stampede through valley floors, crushing everything in their wake. Trees fell. Rock slides roared. Volcanoes bled. The world was not indifferent. It was furious. And yet, humans stayed. Not because they were stronger. Not because they were smarter. But because they refused to be erased. In time, the predators grew cautious. The larger beasts learned to respect firelight. The smaller ones learned to track it. Some tribes were wiped out overnight. Others became ghost stories, their fires burning silently underfoot long after the screams had ended. Those who survived learned to bury their dead with stone blades and quiet prayers. Some said the dinosaurs could smell grief. It is important to understand, there was no golden age. No utopia of man and beast. Coexistence was not peace. It was tension. Constant, raw, electric. And in that crucible, humanity hardened. They did not farm, but they trapped. They did not domesticate, but they shadowed herds. They did not rule, but they endured. Civilization, as we know it, never happened. There were no castles, no kings. The crown was survival, and it passed each night to whoever lived through the dark. The oldest cave paintings do not show gods. They show eyes, watching from the black. Sometimes 6, sometimes 10, sometimes 2, with teeth like roots. They remembered everything. Which plants burned clean. Which moss quieted footsteps. Which dinosaur would ignore you if you stayed still long enough. They passed down silence like a sacred skill. Children learned to breathe shallow, to listen to the shift of the trees, to taste the air. If it smelled of copper, run. If it tasted of rot, hide. By the time they found one another, when scattered tribes began to merge, to send smoke signals, to mark stone with shared language, they were not the same humans we imagine from our textbooks. They were leaner, quieter, dreamier, not less intelligent, but differently focused. They did not look to the stars. They looked to the trees. They watched for movement. They counted heartbeats between sounds. And even in that dimness, they dreamed. Some dreamed of fighting back, of spears sharp enough to pierce scale, of traps deep enough to swallow giants. Others dreamed of peace, of learning the creatures, of reading their patterns like sky maps. But none dreamed of leaving. Earth was theirs. The shadow world, theirs. Not by conquest, not by design, but by inheritance of terror. This was their birthright, the struggle to survive in the dark. And they accepted it. Fully. Bravely. Without complaint. Because in that acceptance came fire. And in fire, hope. So the long night began. Not measured in hours, but in generations. The genesis of a world no light could save, but one humanity could still claim. And this is only the beginning. Backhand index pointing right. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you're ready to keep walking through the dark with us. The struggle is only just beginning. They called it the Day of Tremors. It was neither a dawn nor a dusk. It was an all-night horizon of distant roars that shook the earth like thunder underfoot. The tribe had gathered in a clearing they believed safe, a ring of ancient stones that formed a crude circle of protection. Women tended fires, their faces painted with soot and earth. Children huddled close in furs. Hunters sharpened stone blades in silence, listening to the trembling ground. Then came the sound of footsteps. At first it was a tremor in the dirt, a low, rolling pulse that raced through the feet and rose into the legs. Then a shape emerged beyond the mist, titanic, angular, alive. The T-Rex stepped into the grey half-light, its massive head lowered, nostrils flaring as it tested the air for scent. Scales glistened with dew, its crest sharp against the sky. It moved not quickly, but with inexorable purpose. The tribe stood frozen, caught between prey and predator, between wonder and terror. For a moment, the world held its breath. The beast's small, cruel eyes swept the clearing. It took another step, each footfall compressing earth, cracking branches, splintering stones. A woman behind Astrid clutched her child, biting her lip until blood glistened. A hunter raised his blade, arm trembling like a leaf. And then, the unexpected happened. The creature froze. It cocked its head, as if puzzled by the faint light of the fires. It roared, a sound that cracked the air like a giant's lament, and the tribe answered in screams and the pounding of shields. That first encounter changed everything. Not because anyone survived undaunted. Most fell that night, scattered to the black earth, but because the story of it lived on. The elders spoke of glowing eyes in the dusk, of breath hot as embers, of the feel of scale against flesh. They said the beast brought not only death, but revelation. Humanity was prey in the rawest sense. The gods had not created man to rule the world. They had cast him into a crucible of bone and tooth. In the days that followed, the survivors tattled their fear into patterns. They marked the places where trees were uprooted by massive tails. They mapped the footprints that filled with water like shallow pools. They invented words, growl slow and hiss long, that described not just sound, but intention. They learned that the predator moved in certain rhythms, the dawn stalk, the midday wander, the dusk approach. They realized that fire lent them power that flesh alone could not command. They remembered that the beast had recoiled at sudden flame, that smoke blurred its senses. Children born after that night learned not lullabies, but warnings. Mothers wove stories of a great lizard that carried the sky on its back and drank the rivers dry. Brothers taught sisters how to prick their fingers with heated flint, how to leave a scent that spoke of pain, not prey. And fathers, their hands stained with ash, sat beside new fires and taught their sons the names of stars they would never see stay bright. They spoke of midnight eclipses, of blood moons, of signs that the beast would come again. The first encounter was immortalized in cave paintings, triangular heads, massive legs, spindly arms, drawn with red clay and black charcoal. Ancient hands traced the curved ribs, the ribbed tail, the teeth like daggers. Beside the dinosaur, they painted tiny shapes, humans with spears, humans with torches. The paintings did not celebrate triumph. They mourned hubris. They said, "We were not alone." And yet, in the shattered remains of that clearing, near broken stones and ash-blackened firs, the spark of defiance took flame. Among the bones of comrades and the footprints of the hunter, they found courage. They scavenged slivers of scale, harder than bone yet brittle, to fashion into blades. They scraped the rough skin into powder, mixing it with resin to coat their shields. They carried pieces of teeth as talismans, charms of protection when the sunrise failed to come. It was here, in the aftermath of terror, that the first seeds of understanding took root. The great lizard was more than brute force. It was part of the world's pattern. It fed when herds passed, when rivers swelled, when seasons shifted. It roared as thunder, as rainfall, as volcano, an extension of the planet's fury. And humans, who once believed themselves masters of the land, saw the truth. They were one element among many. By the time the next tremors rolled through the clearing, the tribe stood differently. Not shoulder to shoulder in panic, but spread in silent formation. Some held arrows tipped with scale. Others cradled torches ready to hurl. Astrid herself lifted her voice in a low chant, not of prayer, but of challenge. She spoke not to gods nor spirits, but to the earth itself, demanding right to breathe under its shadow. When the Tyrannosaurus returned, it encountered lines of flickering fire, walls of sharpened wood, shields that bore the scars of its breath. It roared again, but this time thunder met thunder. Sparks flew, stones splintered, and the hunters advanced, not to kill, but to survive. They struck swiftly, screaming, circling, poisoning its blood with herbs that slowed its fury. And though they did not slay the beast, they drove it back into dusk, into the world it had ruled unchallenged. This was the birth of strategy, of respect tempered with ambition. The first encounter taught humanity that survival meant more than hiding. It meant learning. It meant wielding the land's tools, fire, stone, resin, against the very shapes that hunted them. It meant turning terror into knowledge, and knowledge into action. And while the stories of that night carried the scent of fear, they also carried the taste of hope. In the dark that followed, under skies that never dimmed entirely, humans walked with new eyes. They watched for movement in the shadows. They listened for the earth's trembling heartbeat. And they prepared always for the next encounter, knowing that each meeting with the giants was both curse and gift, both danger and the spark that would keep their own story alive. From the ashes of that day of tremors, humanity rose with trembling hands and sharpened mind. They understood, in the raw urgency of survival, that fire alone would not suffice. It kept the giants at bay for a moment, but moments could prove too short. Instead, they wove fire into structures, turned flame into fortress, and fong into barrier. The age of hide and run gave way, at last, to hide and fight, and in this crucible, the first true defenses were born. Tribes gathered around the embers each dawn, not merely to stoke warmth, but to inspect embankments. Moss-wrapped timbers were laid end to end, sharpened at one side with stone axes, creating palisades meant to wound the thick scales of a charging beast. Mothers carried freshly split branches, their edges jagged, too dangerous even for human skin, but necessary to slow the Leviathan's progress. Children watched from behind, learning the geometry of defense, the way a V-shaped barrier funneled a predator toward a narrow gap, where darts could find purchase. Beyond would lay bone. The first defenders scavenged massive ribs and vertebrae from dinosaur kills, jigsawing these spongy, curved structures into natural shields. A fallen rib became a breastplate, a broken scute became a helmet. Flint blades were wired to bone edges, a cruel fusion that left scale and flesh alike prone to tearing. Warriors, now called bone hunters, trained to wield these hybrid weapons, their arms knotted with muscle, their senses sharpened by necessity. But the true genius was fire itself. Torches were no longer handheld fuel for sight alone. They became part of the trap. Bundles of resin-soaked grasses were tied atop stakes around a clearing, so that a charging predator, its roar closer now than ever, would plunge headlong into a ring of flames. The edge caught first, singed, panicked, then the beast reeled into the center, momentarily blinded, panting explosive red breath. In that inferno of confusion, spears rained down. It was never enough to slay the largest, but enough to grant humanity its most precious gift, time. Time became strategy. Tribes formed night watches, each sentinel learning the weight of torch fire in one hand, spear in the other. They tracked the shifting embers, guided by the orange glow, ready to direct approaching footsteps toward prepared kill zones. The bone platforms, the sharpened logs, the fire-lined trenches, They were all laid out not in fear, but in purpose. Fire became language. It said, "If you approach here, this is where you die." The bone hunters memorized the beast's behaviors, how a Spinosaurus might dip its head to drink and momentarily lower its guard. They learned that a pack of raptors, when faced with a barrier too tall, would leap, once, twice, but that each jump forged exhaustion. They kept embers smoldering at the right height, so the creatures had to choose between leaping into heat or pounding against unscalable wood. Either choice bought more moments for spears to be hurled, for flames to rage, for humanity to rewrite its story. Shelters evolved. No longer simple caves or overhangs, they became fortified dens, boulder walls reinforced with wooden stakes, their entrances narrow choke points lined with embers. Even the smallest outpost had a hearth at its heart, not for comfort alone, but as a mobile defense. When threatened, families retreated to the hearthroom, torches raised, children huddled behind heaps of bone and earth. It was a crucible of protection, fire-driven, Fong-guarded, and human-made. In time, oral lessons became formal rituals. Young hunters were tested not only on their aim, but on their ability to craft defenses. Mothers taught weaving of resin-coated vines into nets that snagged claws. Blacksmiths learned to forge iron ramrods capped with bone spikes. The tools of daily life and the instruments of war became one and the same. Survival demanded that every axe, every pot, every basket might serve dual purpose in the darkness. This new era bred innovators. One visionary tied a hollowed bone to a drifting ember, fashioning the first firebomb, a crude incendiary hurled into the open maw of approaching great lizard, igniting resin that burned at temperatures rivaling volcanic rock. Another discovered that a ring of water around a barricade, fed by narrow channels, could reflect firelight into the scales of an attacker, dazzling its vision and fracturing its charge. Every defense was an experiment, tested in blood, refined in loss, perfected in memory. No fortress stood untested. Every trap exacted its price. Yet with each failed defense, tribe grew stronger. The roar in the night, once a harbinger of doom, became the drumbeat of engagement. Humans were no longer helpless. They were hunters of a different sort, ambushing the ambushers, foiling the giant's charge with cunning and flame. The landscape itself became battlefield. Villages nestled in areas where river gorges could guide a tyrannosaur into narrow bends. Fires were lit on high ridges, their smoke signaling safe passage to allied bands. Bone hunters patrolled the twilight frontier, not as fugitives, but as guardians of humanity's fragile flame. Thus the Age of Fire and Fong was born, a time when human hands shaped both bone and ember into bulwarks against extinction. It was hard. It was brutal. But it was the crucible that tempered humanity's will. In the sharpening of wood, in the stacking of bone, in the dancing of flames, humans discovered that survival was not merely living. It was shaping the very world that sought to end them. And so they endured, day by day, night by night, forging hope in the kiln of necessity. In the half-light of this eternal dusk, the world's true rulers emerged. They were not tribes, not kings, not even mountains, though they could level mountains with a single footfall. They were the apex predators, creatures whose power shaped every corner of the land. Humans had once believed they would stand atop the chain of life, but in this shadow world, they learned humility. The T-Rex, the Spinosaurus, the Utahraptor, the Quetzalcoatlus, names whispered in fear, dictated every breath, every step, every moment of wakefulness. The Tyrannosaurus Rex was the lord of open plains, its massive jaw a fortress of bone and tooth. It moved with deceptive slowness, its head sweeping across the horizon, while its powerful legs carried it in long, inexorable strides. Tribes built thorned hedges of sharpened wood to deter its charge and lit roaring conflagrations to confuse its senses. Yet even the fiercest fortification trembled beneath its approach. To hear its roar was to feel the world tremble, as if existence itself quaked in the presence of its dominion. Along riverbanks, the Spinosaurus hunted like a living fortress. Half reptile, half fish, it waded into murky water, its sailback crest slicing through the fog. In sluggish pursuit, it stalked schools of amphibious creatures and, when opportunity struck, lunged onto land to seize anything that strayed too close. Hunters who lived near these waterways learned to traverse the rivers in dugout vessels lined with bone shields, dipping paddles lightly to avoid the creature's notice. Many perished on nocturnal hunts, their rafts capsized by surprise attacks that bent wood like paper. In dense forests and open scrub, packs of utahraptors ruled with cunning and coordination. Smaller than the giants, they made up for size with ferocity and intellect. Working in shadowed groups, they isolated weaker members of a herd, their sickle talons flashing in low light. Tribes learned to mark raptor trails, tying circles of hanging bones or reflective shells to warn others of packs on the hunt. Some respectful survivors even left offerings of meat at the forest's edge, a grim tribute to the quick death these hunters delivered. Above it all, the Quetzalcoatlus reigned in the sky. With wingspans rivaling small aircraft, these pterosaurs roamed the upper reaches of the canopy, their silent glides punctuated by eerie shrieks that echoed through the trees. Children were taught to recognize the shape of their winged silhouettes against the last slant of light. Villages raised netted canopies, webs of resin-coated vines stretched over clearings, to protect livestock and sleeping households from sudden dives. Even a single missed stitch could mean disaster when a beak the size of a canoe broke through beneath the cover. To humans, these predators were more than beasts. They were living mountains of power, embodiments of Earth's wild ferocity. They did not simply kill, they commanded. Their presence shaped migration routes, dictated hunting grounds, and forced alliances among tribes. Some cultures came to worship them, believing the giants were avatars of higher forces, gods of rain and thunder, forge masters of stone and scale. Shrine keepers offered rituals to appease their appetites, the sacrifice of a captured deer, the burning of special woods, the chanting of ancient verses beneath the beasts' roosting grounds. Yet knowledge of their patterns also offered hope. Bone hunters studied their tracks, the tyrannosaur's wide, three-toed prints that dug deep into mud, the raptor's half-moon claw marks, spaced in a surgical arc, the spinosaur's paddle-like footprints, often intermingled with fish scales. From these clues, humans learned to predict hunts. They mapped seasonal movements, noting rivers the Spinosaur favored in summer and grasslands where the T-Rex bred in winter. Ambush points were chosen accordingly: narrow canyons, steep ravines, deep gorges where giants risked entrapment. Some tribes went further. They began to mimic the beast's calls. Using pipes carved from bone and reed, they played low, rumbling notes that echoed a tyrannosaur's growl. This deception, used sparingly, could scatter grazing herbivores and even deter passing predators, buying precious minutes to flee or to strike. Others studied the Quetzalcoatlus's soaring circuits, learning to track thermal columns and avoid high-wind corridors during storm seasons when the winged hunters were most active. Still, no tactic ever removed the fundamental truth: these creatures were apex not by chance, but by design. Evolution had honed them over epochs. Their senses, their strength, their instincts were equal to every challenge the world posed. And humans, though adaptable, remained small. Survival was measured not by victory, but by the narrow margins of daylight and the fleeting moments between encounters. In some dark camps, fires burned in patterns not unlike dragon runes, surrounded by bone totems carved into likenesses of the beasts themselves, a form of sympathetic deterrence. Warriors painted stripes on their skin to resemble raptor camouflage. Others carried tooth-tipped weapons into prayer, believing that carrying a scrap of dinosaur was both protection and a pact. We honor you, we respect you, now grant us life. Yet every story of terror contained a kernel of fascination. The same children who trembled at pack howls would draw pictures of their shapes on cave walls. The same hunters who fled a charging T-Rex would return at dawn to mark the spot where it paused, studying the pattern of claw gouges in stone. Humans were woven into this world of giants not as masters, but as witnesses. And in witnessing, they learned, slowly, painfully, to survive. By understanding the giants, humans began the work of mastering themselves. The apex rulers of the new dawn taught lessons not taught by soft nights and gentle rains. They forced humans to look fear in the eye, to measure heartbeats against roars, to find courage in the darkest corridors of the world. And in doing so, they forged the first true warriors of the stone and ash, men and women who faced monsters and lived to shape fire into both shelter and sword. Under the endless dusk, the predators held dominion. But humanity, through cunning and courage, stood their ground, knowing that to survive beside dragons of old was to become legends themselves. In the long shadow of the giants, where the ground quaked beneath colossal footsteps and the air thrummed with distant roars, humanity began to shift from hunted to hunter. This was no sudden reversal, no miraculous overthrow. It was a slow, painstaking reclaiming of agency born from desperation and hardened by relentless trial. They called themselves the Bone Hunters, warriors forged in fire and fear, masters of the land's cruel calculus. The Bone Hunters did not rise from blind fury, but from knowledge carved in stone and blood. From countless encounters, they had learned the patterns of their adversaries, each track a chapter, each roar a verse in the epic of survival. Their weapons were crafted not only from bone and flint, but from observation. Sharpened raptor claws repurposed as deadly blades, fragments of broken teeth set into spear shafts like jagged fangs, and tools honed by years of understanding how to exploit the smallest weakness in scale and sinew. They were more than warriors. They were scholars of survival. Where others saw monsters, they saw anatomy and instinct. They understood the gait of the Spinosaurus, the turning radius of the T-Rex, the hunting strategy of a raptor pack. Using this knowledge, they devised traps cunning enough to snare even these terrifying behemoths. Pitfalls disguised beneath leaves and twigs, covered in bone and ash to mask their scent, became deadly snares. Bone hunters worked in silence, stalking prey as the giants stalked them, choosing the battleground carefully. Narrow canyons, craggy cliffs, dense thickets where the giant's size became a liability. Their weapons evolved. The spear was no longer just a thrusting tool, but a multi-purpose weapon tipped with the sharpest bones and barbed with resin-coated thorns. They invented throwable darts and bolas, aiming not just to wound but to disorient. In time, they crafted bows from flexible yew branches, strung with sinew pulled from their own beasts, capable of launching arrows with piercing accuracy. Each innovation was a testament to their determination to shift the balance, to impose human will upon the wild. Leadership among the bone hunters emerged naturally, those who combined knowledge with courage. They taught the young to read the land, to track silently, to move with purpose. They shared their scars openly, each a lesson in what to avoid, a map for the next hunter. Their gatherings were not mere celebrations, but war councils, planning ambushes beneath the sickle of the moon. Songs told of great hunts, of battles won with blade and brain, of losses endured and avenged. These stories became the bedrock of culture, imbuing the tribe with identity and resolve. Among the most legendary was the tale of Jarl Eirik, a man who led his band to fell a T-Rex by luring it into a pit concealed with woven branches and topped with a sharpened bed of bone spikes. The creature, blinded by rage and confusion, fell into the trap and was pierced repeatedly by spears from every side until it breathed its last thunder. Eirik's name became a whisper on the wind, a symbol of defiance that burned in the hearts of those who dared to stand. The bone hunter's rise was not without cost. Every hunt was a dance with death. The giant's jaws crushed bones like twigs. Their claws shredded flesh in seconds. Many warriors never returned from the hunt, swallowed by earth or flesh. Yet, their sacrifice forged a new path, a hard-won respect between man and beast. This was not conquest but coexistence through conflict, a balance maintained by mutual recognition of power. The psychological transformation was profound. Where once fear ruled, now respect flickered. Bone hunters understood that their prey was not mindless destruction but a force of nature, ancient, indifferent, magnificent. This respect did not breed mercy but wisdom. They learned when to strike, when to retreat, when to wait for the moment when the giant was vulnerable, fatigued from long chase, distracted by its own young, or injured from a rival. Every hunt was an intricate puzzle, every victory a testament to patience and planning. Training became rigorous. Young hunters were tested from an early age, tasked with tracking small but dangerous creatures to hone stealth and speed. They learned to mimic the calls of smaller dinosaurs, to mask their scent with mud and ash, to read the subtle signs of a beast's approach, the trembling grass, the snapped twig, the disturbed earth. Strength was vital, but so was cunning. The bone hunters became experts in psychological warfare, using deception and surprise to unbalance even the fiercest foes. Their tactics extended beyond the hunt. Bone hunters became guardians of their tribes, protecting villages from nocturnal attacks with sharpened stakes and burning torches. They organized watch rotations, communicating silently through signals carved into bark or stone. At night, when the giants prowled, the bone hunters stood vigilant, a human wall of flame and steel against the dark. The rise of the bone hunters was also marked by innovation in shelter and defense. They constructed fortified camps surrounded by thorny barricades and bone palisades, designed to withstand even the most furious assault. Inside, fires burned continuously, their smoke confusing the keen noses of approaching predators. The layout of these camps was strategic: narrow paths, hidden pits, and watchtowers made from fallen trees. Every element was crafted to give humans the upper hand, however slight. Over time, the bone hunters' knowledge expanded beyond the immediate. They began to study the giants' behaviors in detail, mating rituals, migration patterns, nesting grounds. This information was vital, allowing hunters to anticipate movements and avoid unnecessary confrontations. Some tribes even marked safe zones, areas where predators rarely ventured, providing temporary sanctuary. These zones became centers of human culture, places where art, song, and knowledge flourished amidst the ever-present threat. The bone hunters also understood the importance of unity. Tribes that had once been isolated found strength in alliance, sharing knowledge and pooling resources. Joint hunts were organized to take down the largest and most dangerous creatures. These were perilous endeavors, requiring precise coordination and absolute trust. The bonds forged in these shared struggles transcended mere survival. They laid the foundation for community and identity. Yet, even as they grew in strength and wisdom, the bone hunters never lost sight of the fragility of their existence. Every victory was shadowed by the memory of loss, every step forward balanced on the knife edge of fate. The giants were relentless, eternal forces of nature that shaped the very land they inhabited. To challenge them was to accept the possibility of annihilation. And so, the bone hunters lived in perpetual readiness, warriors, scholars, guardians. Their lives were defined by the constant interplay between fear and courage, knowledge and instinct, death and survival. They were the vanguard of humanity's struggle in the shadow world, a testament to the resilience and ingenuity that could arise even in the darkest of ages. In the echo of roaring beasts and crackling fires, The bone hunters carved their legacy, a fierce declaration that humanity would not be extinguished. They were the sharpened spear in the night, the burning torch against the cold, the whisper of defiance that would echo through the ages. Through bone and fire, they fought not just for survival, but for the right to exist in a world ruled by giants. And thus, the tide began to turn. As the world settled into a haunting rhythm beneath a sky forever muted by dusk, the night became a realm of both terror and opportunity. In this landscape of shadows, humanity's greatest challenge was not merely the giant predators that roamed the day, but the darkness itself, a living, breathing force that swallowed light, distorted sound, and cloaked the land in mystery. To survive in the perpetual twilight was to dance with unseen dangers, to listen with sharpened senses, and to embrace the night as both adversary and ally. The concept of night in this shadow world was alien to us. It was not a brief respite, a simple cycle between light and dark. Instead, it was an extended, oppressive state that blurred the boundaries of time and space. Stars were faint pinpricks behind thick clouds, and the moon, when it appeared, cast only a pale, uncertain glow. Darkness was thick like smoke, filling valleys and forests with a suffocating stillness. It was a silence heavy with anticipation, where the slightest sound could mean life or death. For the tribes, the coming of night was marked by rituals born from necessity. As the sun dipped below a horizon that never fully brightened, communities gathered around fires, their flickering flames creating islands of warmth and safety in an ocean of black. Fires were not just for heat, they were beacons, signals, and shields. The smoke spiraled upward, mingling with a heavy mist, a visible thread linking the living to the sky above. Around these fires, stories were told, not only to pass time, but to teach, to warn, and to prepare the mind for the dangers that lurked beyond the circle of light. The darkness was a realm ruled by senses heightened to their limits. Sight was often useless beyond a few feet. Instead, the ears and the nose took command. Hunters learned to detect the subtle rustle of scales brushing leaves, the distant drip of water disturbed by massive footsteps, the sharp inhale of a predator's breath. They developed signals, soft whistles, tapping on wood, the rhythmic pounding of sticks, that conveyed warnings without attracting unwanted attention. Silence became a tool as vital as the spear. But night was also a time of vulnerability. Predators who avoided daylight prowled freely, their eyes adjusted to the gloom. Some, like the giant nocturnal crocodiliforms, slipped silently through swamps, muscles rippling beneath dark water, their jaws snapping with sudden ferocity. Others, smaller but deadly, used the cover of night to ambush unsuspecting prey, their glowing eyes the last sight many would ever see. The bone hunters learned that every shadow might conceal a threat, and every movement could betray their presence. To counter this, human ingenuity transformed the night itself. Torches were modified to burn longer and brighter, fueled by resins and oils that created smoke thick enough to confuse even the most sensitive noses. Some tribes fashioned lanterns from hollowed gourds or animal skins, shielding the flame while casting a wide glow. These lights were not mere comfort. They were lifelines in a world where darkness meant death. Patrols were organized, walking the perimeter of camps with torches held high, their shadows stretching long and tall, warnings etched into the night. Sleep itself became a calculated risk. In communal huts fortified with bone and wood, families slept in shifts, some resting while others kept watch. This vigilance was learned through bitter experience. Tales were told of entire households wiped out during a single moment of slumber, when a pack of predators slipped past defenses under the cloak of darkness. Yet even in these precarious conditions, sleep was vital, a balm for muscles weary from the day's exertions and minds sharp from constant alertness. The bone hunters developed techniques to maximize rest despite the threats. Earthen mounds were raised within sleeping areas to muffle sounds, Herbal concoctions known for their calming properties were brewed and consumed before rest, and sleeping positions were adjusted to allow immediate awakening. Some elders spoke of meditative practices that quieted the mind, reducing fear and easing the transition into sleep. This balance between vigilance and surrender was a delicate art, taught from generation to generation. Night also fostered a unique spirituality. The darkness was seen not merely as absence of light, but as a living entity, an ancient force both feared and revered. Rituals honored the spirits believed to dwell in the shadows, guardians and tricksters who shaped fate and fortune. Amulets crafted from bone and stone were worn to ward off malevolent creatures, while offerings were left at camp entrances to appease unseen powers. Dreams, experienced in this twilight realm, were considered messages from the ancestors or warnings of coming danger. The perpetual dusk challenged human perception of time. Days blended into nights without clear boundaries, altering cycles of activity and rest. Seasonal changes, though muted, still influenced behavior. During the few months when the sky brightened slightly, tribes expanded their hunts and repairs. When darkness thickened, they retreated, focusing on storytelling, crafting, and healing. This fluid adaptation to the shifting light reinforced a deep connection to the environment, a rhythm dictated not by clocks, but by the pulse of the earth and sky. In this shadowed world, even the smallest spark held monumental power. Fires were treasured and protected fiercely, stolen flames seen as acts of war. Knowledge of how to create fire from friction, flint, and kindling was guarded as sacred wisdom. The ability to rekindle a dying ember could mean the difference between life and oblivion. Tribes passed these skills down with reverence, ensuring that no generation would be left helpless in the dark. Ultimately, survival in the perpetual twilight demanded more than physical endurance. It required resilience of spirit and unity. Communities thrived not just by strength, but through cooperation, sharing resources, pooling knowledge, and supporting one another against the night's terrors. The social bonds forged in these shared struggles became the foundation of culture, identity, and hope. Thus, humanity's journey through the shadow world was not a tale of conquest, but of adaptation. In the relentless twilight, where giants roamed and darkness whispered threats, humans learned to transform fear into vigilance, vulnerability into strategy, and night into a realm of possibility. Through fire and shadow, song and silence, they carved out a fragile existence, a testament to the indomitable will to live against all odds. And in this dance with darkness, they prepared for whatever dawn the world might yet reveal. In the endless twilight, where shadows stretched like whispered secrets and the earth itself seemed to breathe with ancient life, humanity found more than mere survival. They found stories. Stories that grew from fear, from triumph, from the unyielding need to explain the unfathomable world around them. In this crucible of darkness and danger, myth was born, a tapestry woven from the raw threads of experience and imagination, binding generations across the shifting sands of time. The giants that roamed the land were more than beasts. They became living symbols. Their thunderous steps echoed not only through the forests and plains, but through the hearts of those who faced them. A roaring Tyrannosaurus was not just a predator. It was the embodiment of chaos, the earth's wrath made flesh. The Spinosaurus became the river's shadow, a silent judge of those who dared cross its domain. Raptors transformed into cunning spirits, guardians of the unseen realms between dusk and dawn. And the winged Quetzalcoatlus was the messenger of sky and storm, a harbinger of change. These creatures, feared and respected, took shape in the human mind as gods and demons, ancestors and omens. Through oral tradition, their stories evolved, retold around flickering fires, carried on the wind through whispered song, etched into cave walls where flickering flames brought painted scales and claws to life. Each narrative was a thread in a growing web of meaning, a guide to navigating a world ruled by forces beyond human control. Memory became sacred. Elders were keepers of lore, their voices the bridge between the past and the present. They recounted the great hunts, the terrible losses, the moments when humans had stood firm against overwhelming odds. These tales were not mere entertainment but vital lessons, encoding survival strategies, warnings, and moral codes. They taught the young to honor the land and its creatures, to respect the balance between predator and prey, life and death. The myths served another purpose. They forged identity. In a world of constant threat, knowing who you were, and where you belonged, was as important as knowing how to wield a spear. Stories linked individuals to their tribe, their ancestors, and the spirits that guarded them. Names were given with reverence, often drawn from legendary heroes or beasts, imbuing each person with the strength and wisdom of those who had come before. Through myth, humans claimed their place in a cosmos that seemed indifferent, even hostile. Rituals grew from these stories, acts designed to bridge the seen and unseen worlds. Before a hunt, hunters would perform dances mimicking the movements of their quarry, seeking favor and stealth. Offerings of food and crafted trinkets were laid at altars fashioned from bone and stone, asking for protection or forgiveness. Shamans, figures both feared and revered, interpreted dreams and omens, guiding decisions that balanced practicality with spiritual insight. These rituals bound the tribe together, forging a shared reality where survival was both physical and spiritual. Dreams themselves became portals to the past and future. In the perpetual dusk, when sleep was both refuge and risk, dreams were rich with symbolism, visions of ancestors, warnings of coming danger, glimpses of hidden knowledge. Elders taught that dreams could be messages from the great beasts or the spirits of the land, and that interpreting them was an art requiring patience and respect. Some individuals were believed to possess the gift of prophecy, their sleepwalking and visions guiding the tribe's fate. Art flourished alongside myth. Cave paintings, carved bone amulets, and woven tapestries captured the creatures of legend and the heroes who faced them. These artifacts were more than decoration. They were tools of memory and magic. Each brushstroke, each etched line, was a prayer for survival, a reminder of lessons learned, a celebration of resilience. Through art, the intangible became tangible, allowing the tribe to touch the stories that shaped their world. Language evolved as well, becoming rich with metaphor and symbolism. Words for the giants were layered with meaning, often invoking multiple senses, sight, sound, smell, to capture the essence of these beings. Names were spoken cautiously, sometimes only in whispers, for fear that to speak a creature's name aloud might summon it closer. This reverence for language reinforced the power of stories and their role in shaping reality. The interplay between myth and memory created a living tradition, one that adapted as the world changed. As tribes migrated, encountered new creatures, or faced new challenges, their stories evolved. New characters appeared, old legends merged, and fresh rituals emerged. This dynamic process ensured that the cultural fabric remained vibrant and relevant, capable of guiding the tribe through each season of peril and promise. Through myth, humanity transformed the terror of the shadow world into a source of strength. The giants that could have crushed them became teachers and guardians in the collective consciousness, embodying the lessons of survival, respect, and balance. The stories carried hope as much as fear, reminding the tribe that they were part of a larger cycle, of life, death, and renewal. In the echoes of the past, humanity found a path forward. Myth was not escape, but engagement, a way to confront the unknown with courage and wisdom. It was the soul's armor against the darkness, the mind's map through the wilderness. And as long as the stories were told, the tribe would endure. Thus, from the bones of ancient monsters and the flicker of firelight, the great saga of humanity's struggle was born, an epic written not in ink, but in memory, song, and spirit. It was a testament to the power of stories to shape not only how we survive, but who we become. And in that sacred narrative, the shadow world became home. In the relentless cycle of epochs, where time stretched beyond the grasp of memory, the world itself began to shift beneath the feet of its inhabitants. The vast landscapes that once echoed only with the thunder of titanic beasts grew restless, shaped by the unseen hands of climate, geology, and the ceaseless dance of the elements. The giants who had ruled the twilight began to waver, their dominion challenged not solely by human cunning, but by the changing face of the earth itself. The skies grew uncertain. Clouds thickened, blotting out the faint light that had barely penetrated the endless dusk. Rain fell with renewed fury, carving deep ravines and swelling rivers that roared like unleashed beasts. Seasons, once marked by subtle shifts, became tumultuous, winters colder and more unforgiving, summers brief and erratic. The land, shaped by fire and ice, demanded adaptation. Forests contracted, replaced by sprawling grasslands and marshes where new life struggled to take hold. For the giants, these changes were both boon and bane. Some species adapted, evolving to fit the new environments. The Spinosaurus, masters of river and swamp, thrived in expanding wetlands, while others faltered, their massive frames ill-suited to the shrinking forest canopies. The T-Rex, once lord of open plains, faced new challenges as herds of prey shifted their migrations, seeking shelter and sustenance in unfamiliar territories. Raptors adapted their hunting strategies, becoming more elusive and cunning as cover thinned and new predators emerged. Humans, ever watchful, sensed the tides of change with keen eyes and restless hearts. Their survival depended not only on confronting the giants, but on reading the subtle signals whispered by wind and water, by the rustling of leaves and the flight of birds. They learned that the beasts' movements were no longer predictable, that migration routes shifted like sand dunes, and that new dangers lurked in unfamiliar places. The bone hunters found themselves navigating an ever-changing maze, their knowledge tested by the mutable world. In response, human societies grew more flexible. Tribes became nomadic, moving with the seasons and following the herds that fed their fires and filled their bellies. Shelter evolved into portable forms, woven mats, animal hides stretched over frames that could be assembled and disassembled with speed and efficiency. Communities forged alliances, sharing knowledge of new hunting grounds and safe passages. The art of survival became one of constant motion, an intricate dance choreographed with nature's shifting rhythm. Agriculture, in its earliest whispers, began to take root. Humans observed which plants thrived in altered soils and which seeds bore fruit through harsh seasons. Small gardens appeared near settlements, cultivated with care and guarded fiercely. These early attempts at cultivation were fragile experiments against the backdrop of wilderness and giants, yet they hinted at a future where humanity might shape the land as much as the land shaped them. The shifting climate also altered the very food chain. Some megafauna dwindled, their populations fragmented by changing habitats. New creatures, smaller, faster, more adaptable, emerged to fill the void. Humans incorporated these into their diets, learning new hunting techniques and refining their tools to match. The bone hunters' spears and traps evolved to target swift antelopes and elusive birds as much as the lumbering giants. The diversity of prey expanded, reflecting the mosaic of the transformed landscape. Water became both sanctuary and peril. Rivers swollen with rain became arteries of life, supporting fish and waterfowl, yet also pathways for predators and enemies. Humans learned to navigate these waterways with crafted rafts and dugout canoes, mastering the currents and eddies to travel and trade. Yet the same waters could turn deadly in floods or become breeding grounds for insects that carried disease. Knowledge of the rhythms of water was as vital as knowledge of fire. The great forests, once impenetrable, thinned into groves and scattered trees. Fire, both natural and human-made, played a pivotal role. Lightning storms sparked blazes that reshaped the terrain, clearing old growth and encouraging new sprouts. Humans wielded fire strategically, using it to drive game, clear fields for planting, and protect settlements. This early mastery of landscape management marked a profound shift. Humans were no longer mere subjects of nature, but participants in its transformation. Spiritually, these changes reverberated deeply. The myths of giants and shadows evolved to encompass new forces: the winds that howled through the open plains, the rains that nourished yet threatened, the cycles of growth and decay visible in the shifting seasons. Shamans and elders interpreted these changes as signs from the spirits, guiding the tribe through uncertain times. Rituals adapted, honoring not only the creatures of flesh and scale, but the elements that shaped their fate. The bonds between tribes grew stronger, forged in shared challenges and common hope. Trade networks expanded, linking distant communities through the exchange of goods, flint tools, crafted pottery, rare herbs, and ideas. Knowledge flowed along these routes, spreading innovations in hunting, gathering, and early agriculture. Language evolved, enriched by the mingling of dialects and the need to describe an increasingly complex world. Yet, the encroaching twilight was relentless. The giants' decline was gradual but inexorable, their numbers thinning as habitats fragmented and resources dwindled. The bone hunters witnessed the fading of old kings, their roars becoming echoes in the wind. Some tribes mourned these losses, while others saw opportunity, a chance to claim lands once dominated by beasts. But with each passing season, new threats emerged: rival human bands vying for territory, diseases born on the wings of insects, the relentless hunger of the changing earth. Through these trials, humanity's resilience was tested and tempered. The lessons learned in shadow and fire, in chase and flight, became the foundation for a new era. Adaptation was no longer a response, but a necessity, a way of life etched into the bones and hearts of the people. In the great tide of change, the story of giants and humans intertwined ever more tightly. The twilight of the giants marked the dawn of human dominion, not through brute force alone, but through wisdom, cooperation, and the enduring will to survive. And as the earth turned, ever mutable beneath the endless sky, humanity stepped forward, not as conquerors, but as stewards of a world forever transformed. In the fragile moments between light and shadow, where the earth breathed its ancient secrets, humanity began to weave the threads of connection. Communication blossomed, not just as survival tool, but as the heartbeat of culture, the foundation of community, and the vessel of identity. From the quiet murmurs shared in the dark to the thunderous calls echoing across vast plains, humans transformed isolation into unity, and instinct into understanding. Language was no sudden gift. It was a slow unfolding, an evolutionary symphony played over generations. Early utterances were gestures, grunts, and cries, shaped by necessity but enriched by imagination. These sounds, sharp, soft, rhythmic, carried warnings, invitations, and stories. Around flickering fires, they became the first songs and prayers, weaving bonds of trust and shared purpose. As tribes grew, so too did their vocabulary, expanding to describe not only the immediate but the abstract: the wind, the rain, the spirits, and the giants that roamed beyond sight. The art of listening became as vital as speaking. In a world where danger lurked in every shadow, understanding the subtle nuances of sound, the shift in tone, the length of a pause, the urgency behind a call, could mean survival. Hunters developed codes, a complex system of whistles, clicks, and signals that conveyed detailed messages across distance without revealing their presence. These were the whispers in the wind, secret languages shaped by the land's perils and possibilities. Communication was more than exchange of information. It was the forging of social fabric. Shared stories became rituals, their telling a sacred act that bound individuals into tribe and kinship. The oral tradition preserved history and wisdom, passing down knowledge of hunts, of seasons, of alliances and enmities. Elders' voices carried the weight of centuries, their words painting pictures as vivid as any firelight flicker. Through story, the past was kept alive, a guide and a warning for the uncertain path ahead. The rise of culture found its expression in myriad forms. Music emerged, born from the rhythmic pounding of drums made from stretched animal hides and carved wood. The haunting calls of bone flutes echoed through valleys, their notes mimicking the cries of birds and beasts, bridging the gap between human and nature. Dance followed, a language of movement that told stories of hunt and harvest, of love and loss, of birth and death. These rituals were not mere entertainment, they were ceremonies of identity, celebrations of life's fragility and strength. Art flourished in parallel. The cave walls, once silent, became galleries of memory and myth. Hands coated in pigment pressed against stone, leaving prints as enduring as the stories they accompanied. Scenes of predators and prey, of hunts and ceremonies, were etched and painted in ochres, charcoal, and minerals, a testament to human creativity born in the crucible of survival. Each image was a declaration. We were here. We lived. We endured. Symbolism took root. Objects, bones carved into amulets, stones painted with patterns, feathers woven into headdresses, became carriers of meaning beyond their physical form. These tokens embodied protection, status, and belief. They connected the wearer to ancestors, to spirits, to the natural world. The crafting of such objects required skill and knowledge, passed down through apprenticeships and oral instruction, fostering specialization and complexity within communities. Social structures deepened with the rise of communication and culture. Roles emerged: storytellers who preserved history, shamans who bridged the physical and spiritual realms, artisans who shaped materials into tools and symbols. These roles were vital to the tribe's cohesion and resilience, each person contributing to a collective identity that transcended mere survival. Cooperation and shared values became as critical as strength and cunning. The development of shared language and culture also fostered diplomacy. Tribes that once viewed each other solely as rivals began to negotiate, forming alliances sealed by ritual and exchange. Trade routes crisscrossed the lands, carrying goods and ideas, flint from distant quarries, pigments from rare minerals, crafted beads and woven fabrics. Through these networks, innovation spread, accelerating the evolution of technology and social complexity. Communication bridged the divide between the seen and unseen. Myth and spirituality found voice through language, shaping beliefs that guided behavior and understanding of the world. Stories of giants were not just about fear but about respect and coexistence, embedding ethical codes that balanced human needs with natural forces. Rituals invoked spirits for protection, healing, and guidance, creating a shared cosmology that provided meaning amidst chaos. Even conflict was shaped by emerging communication. Warfare became more strategic, coordinated through signals and plans rather than raw violence alone. Understanding the language of rival tribes allowed for negotiation, ambush, and alliance. The ability to speak and listen was a weapon as potent as any spear. In the ebb and flow of twilight, the rise of communication and culture transformed humanity. No longer solitary survivors, humans became creators of worlds, worlds of meaning, connection, and hope. Language, art, and ritual wove the fabric of society, enabling them to navigate the dangers of giants and darkness with wisdom and unity. Through these whispers and stories, humanity carved its destiny, a journey from mere existence toward becoming something greater. The shadows of night were no longer just threats, but stages upon which the human spirit danced, sang, and dreamed. And in this dance, the seeds of civilization were sown, destined to grow beyond the twilight and into the dawn. In a world ruled by giants and shadows, brute strength alone was never enough. The bone hunters learned this hard truth early on, and from the ashes of countless battles and narrow escapes, they honed a new art, the art of strategy and stealth. This silent warfare became their signature, a quiet rebellion against overwhelming power, turning the very darkness that threatened them into a cloak of survival and triumph. The great beasts, massive and powerful, ruled by force and presence. But humans discovered that the advantage lay in subtlety. The bone hunters studied the giants' behaviors with relentless precision, their feeding times, their patrol routes, their vulnerabilities in movement and senses. Where the T-Rex relied on overwhelming force and a powerful bite, humans exploited its comparatively limited eyesight and cumbersome turning radius. Raptors, though swift and cunning, could be misled by false trails and carefully placed decoys. Night became the canvas for their tactics. By learning to move without sound, to blend into the environment like shadows themselves, humans created a new dimension of the hunt. Skin was smeared with mud and crushed foliage to break up outlines. Soft leather boots muffled footsteps on leaf litter and moss. Smoke from damp leaves was used sparingly to mask scent. The art of tracking became twofold, pursuing prey and evading detection, a dance as old as survival itself. Tactics were no longer solitary gambits, but orchestrated maneuvers. Teams coordinated movements with silent signals, subtle hand gestures, stone taps, or the flicker of a firefly. The bone hunters mastered ambushes, choosing terrain that negated the giant's strengths. Narrow ravines where a large predator could become trapped, rocky outcrops where it could be flanked, river crossings where it was vulnerable to attack. These traps required patience and discipline. To strike too soon or too late meant death. Weaponry evolved to match these strategies. Spears were designed for throwing as much as thrusting, balanced to fly straight and true. The addition of barbs and serrated edges made wounds bleed longer, weakening prey over time. Nets woven from plant fibers and sinew were employed to entangle legs or necks, immobilizing even the mightiest creatures long enough for the hunters to deliver fatal blows. Bows, crafted from the flexible yew and strung with sinew, allowed attacks from a distance, preserving safety while maintaining pressure. Stealth was not only physical but psychological. Bone hunters mimicked the calls of other animals, using cries and howls to distract or lure predators into traps. The use of fire was refined. Controlled torches and smoky fires could be signals or tools to flush out creatures from hiding. Nighttime was not just for hiding but for active strategy, raids on nests, sabotage of hunting grounds, and psychological warfare to unnerve the giants. Training was rigorous and communal. Young hunters learned the language of the land, how to read footprints, broken twigs, disturbed foliage, and other subtle signs that betrayed the presence of giant beasts. They practiced moving silently over uneven terrain, holding their breath at the right moments, and striking with precision. Mistakes meant death. Lessons were etched into muscle memory and oral tradition alike. Elders shared stories of ambushes lost and won, embedding strategy into the tribe's collective consciousness. The mental fortitude required for this silent hunt was immense. Hunters faced not only the threat of physical attack, but the constant tension of waiting, watching, and restraining action until the perfect moment. Fear had to be mastered, replaced by focused calm and an acute awareness of surroundings. The success of the hunt, and the survival of the tribe, depended on this balance. Stealth extended beyond hunting. When moving through hostile territory or passing near other tribes, bone hunters adopted tactics to avoid detection. Camps were concealed in dense thickets or high groves. Fires were kept low or extinguished early. movement was limited during peak predator activity. Such caution was essential in a world where humans were both hunter and prey. The evolution of strategy and stealth also fostered innovation. The use of simple camouflage, the crafting of decoys, and the development of silent weapons all emerged from this necessity. This was a knowledge passed down and refined, a sophisticated understanding of predator-prey dynamics that would influence humanity's future far beyond the Twilight world. Spiritually, the silent hunt became a rite of passage, a sacred dance between life and death. It was believed that the spirits of the giants were to be respected and feared, and that the hunt required not only skill but humility. Rituals before and after the hunt invoked protection and thanksgiving, acknowledging the fragile balance between humans and the titans of the land. Through these silent strategies, humanity carved out space within the vast shadow of the giants. They transformed fear into mastery, vulnerability into power. The bone hunters were no longer mere survivors but tacticians, turning the art of war into a means of coexistence and eventual dominion. In the stillness of the night, under the watchful gaze of the stars dimmed by eternal dusk, the silent hunters thrived, not by overwhelming strength, but by the quiet power of patience, precision, and cunning. This evolution of strategy was a pivotal chapter in the epic struggle for survival, a testament to the indomitable spirit that would one day reshape the world itself. Amid the vast wilderness, beneath skies heavy with twilight and the distant echoes of giants, humanity discovered a truth as old and unyielding as the earth itself. Survival was not merely the triumph of the individual, but the strength of the collective. The harsh demands of a world shared with titanic predators forged bonds deeper than blood, ties woven through shared struggle, mutual protection, and the unspoken understanding that life's fragile thread was strongest when entwined with others. The formation of communities was an act of profound necessity. Early humans realized that to endure the relentless threats of the shadow world, they needed more than spears and cunning. They needed trust, cooperation, and the creation of social structures that could withstand both external and internal storms. These communities were small but tightly knit, their members bound by kinship, shared experience, and a collective will to survive. Kinship was the cornerstone. Families formed the nucleus of social groups, with elders revered for their wisdom and youth cherished for their potential. These units were not isolated. They interlinked through marriage, alliances, and common purpose, creating networks of support that extended across the landscape. Each individual's survival was intertwined with the survival of the whole, creating a system where care and responsibility were communal imperatives. The architecture of these early societies reflected their priorities. Shelters were constructed not as isolated sanctuaries but as communal spaces, designed to house multiple generations and protect against the encroaching darkness. Longhouses and clustered huts were centers of warmth, storytelling, and strategy, places where firelight flickered on faces etched with the marks of hardship and hope. These dwellings were more than shelters. They were the hearths of culture and identity. Within these communities, roles and responsibilities emerged with clarity and purpose. Hunters, gatherers, caretakers, and artisans each contributed their unique skills to the survival of the group. Knowledge was shared openly, with skills taught from elders to the young through demonstration and story. This transmission of wisdom ensured that each generation was better equipped than the last to face the world's challenges. Social rituals reinforced these bonds. Ceremonies marking birth, coming of age, marriage, and death provided structure and meaning, embedding individuals within the community's fabric. These rites were accompanied by storytelling, song, and dance, expressions of shared memory and collective aspiration. They honored the cycles of life and the enduring presence of ancestors, connecting past and present in a continuous chain. Conflict within communities, inevitable in any society, was managed through emerging systems of negotiation and consensus. Elders and respected figures mediated disputes, drawing on shared values and the imperative of unity. Violence was a last resort, tempered by the understanding that internal strife weakened the group's ability to face external threats. The survival of the many depended on the restraint and wisdom of the few. The interdependence within communities extended to daily survival. Food was shared, care given to the sick and injured, and protection offered to the vulnerable. This mutual support was not merely altruism but a strategic necessity. Each member's well-being contributed to the strength of the whole. Children were raised collectively, learning not only skills but the social norms that would guide them through life. Beyond individual groups, alliances between communities became vital. Trade and exchange of goods, flint, pigments, food, and crafted items, created networks of interaction that spread innovation and knowledge. These alliances were often cemented through shared rituals and intermarriage, weaving a larger social tapestry across the land. The bonds of community also extended into the spiritual realm. Shared beliefs in spirits, ancestors, and the forces that govern the natural world provided a common framework for understanding and coping with uncertainty. Rituals invoking protection, fertility, and guidance strengthened communal identity and resilience, offering psychological comfort amid constant danger. In times of crisis, be it a predator attack, natural disaster, or famine, communities rallied together with fierce solidarity. Collective defense strategies were employed, with watchful sentinels, coordinated responses, and shared resources. The ability to mobilize quickly and effectively could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. The social fabric was also a source of emotional sustenance. In the face of loss and hardship, the presence of others provided comfort and hope. The sharing of grief, joy, and hope knit individuals into a supportive whole, mitigating the isolating effects of fear and uncertainty. This psychological resilience was as critical as physical protection. The enduring strength of these bonds shaped the trajectory of human evolution. Cooperation and social complexity laid the groundwork for the development of language, culture, and technology. They fostered empathy, communication, and the moral codes that would define humanity's future. Through the interwoven lives of many, humanity transcended the challenges of the shadowed world. The survival of individuals became the survival of tribes. The survival of tribes became the survival of a species. In the crucible of shared adversity, the bonds that bind were forged, unbreakable links that carried the flame of life through the darkest nights and into the promise of dawn. In the deep, shadowed twilight of a world shared with colossal beasts, humanity's survival demanded more than raw strength or cunning alone. It required ingenuity, a spark of creativity that kindled the fires of innovation. This was the dawn of technology, a transformation that would reshape not only how humans lived, but how they understood and shaped their relationship with the world. The first flames flickered tentatively in the darkness. Fire, long revered as both a tool and a protector, became the cornerstone of this new era. Humans learned to kindle and maintain it with growing skill, harnessing its warmth against the biting cold of night and the threatening jaws of predators. But fire was only the beginning. Around these flickering lights, tools were shaped from stone, bone, and wood, simple at first, then increasingly sophisticated. The crafting of tools marked a profound shift. Sharp flakes chipped from flint and obsidian became knives and scrapers, their edges honed through repeated use and refinement. Spears took on new forms, designed for balance and precision, tipped with carefully shaped points that could pierce the thick hides of giant beasts. The emergence of the bow and arrow added a deadly reach, allowing hunters to strike from a distance while minimizing risk. These tools were not mere objects. They were extensions of the human body and mind, transforming limitations into possibilities. The careful selection of materials reflected deep understanding. Different stones for cutting or piercing, flexible woods for shafts and handles, animal sinews for binding and tension. Each creation was a testament to observation, experimentation, and patience, passed down through generations as both knowledge and art. Innovation was driven by necessity and opportunity. As climates shifted and habitats changed, new challenges emerged. Humans adapted their tools to new prey and environments, nets and traps to catch swift animals, digging sticks for tubers, fishhooks fashioned from bone to exploit river and coastal resources. The mastery of watercraft, from simple rafts to dugout canoes, opened new avenues for travel, trade, and resource gathering. The workshop of early humans was often the landscape itself. Stones were selected from riverbeds, wood harvested from groves, bones scavenged or collected from the remains of hunted beasts. The environment was both supplier and teacher, offering raw materials and lessons in durability, flexibility, and utility. Over time, toolkits became specialized, reflecting the diversity of tasks essential to survival. Crafting was communal and educational. Elders taught the young not only how to make tools, but how to use them wisely and maintain them. This transmission of skill was vital, creating continuity and innovation simultaneously. Mistakes and successes were shared through stories and demonstration, embedding practical knowledge within cultural memory. The rise of technology was accompanied by an evolution in cognition. The capacity for planning, foresight, and abstract thought deepened. Toolmaking required envisioning a desired outcome, manipulating materials with precision, and solving problems creatively. These mental leaps paralleled developments in communication and social organization, feeding a feedback loop that accelerated human progress. Beyond utility, tools acquired symbolic significance. Certain crafted objects became status symbols or ritual implements, reflecting social hierarchies and spiritual beliefs. Ornate handles, decorated points, and carefully preserved tools spoke of identity and belonging. Some tools were believed to hold power beyond their physical form, imbued with the spirit of their maker or the hunt. Fire's transformative power extended into food preparation and preservation. Cooking rendered tough meats digestible, unlocking new sources of nutrition and energy crucial for brain development. The controlled use of fire for smoking and drying food allowed storage and transport, buffering against scarcity. These advances improved health and resilience, supporting growing populations. The interplay of technology and environment shaped settlement patterns. Humans could exploit a broader range of resources, enabling longer stays in specific areas and the establishment of more complex dwellings. Stone hearths, storage pits, and crafted containers signaled a move towards permanence and stability amid a changing world. Trade networks flourished alongside technological advances. Crafted tools and raw materials became commodities exchanged between groups, facilitating cultural diffusion and innovation. The movement of flint, pigments, shells, and rare woods linked distant communities, knitting a web of interaction that extended knowledge far beyond immediate surroundings. The spiritual dimension of technology emerged in parallel. Fire and crafted tools were central to rituals and ceremonies, seen as gifts from the gods or manifestations of ancestral power. The act of creation was sacred, a bridge between the mundane and the divine. These beliefs infused everyday objects with meaning, strengthening community bonds and cultural identity. Challenges accompanied innovation. The increased reliance on tools required maintenance and knowledge, creating vulnerabilities when resources were scarce or skills lost. Conflicts sometimes arose over prized materials or technological secrets. Yet, the overall trajectory was one of growth and resilience, as humanity harnessed technology to thrive amidst giants and darkness. Through the flames of innovation, humans transformed from passive participants in a brutal world to active architects of their destiny. Tools became the language of power and possibility, enabling a new relationship with the environment, one of mastery tempered by respect. This dawn of technology was a crucible of change, where creativity and survival merged, lighting the path toward the civilizations yet to come. In the flickering firelight of prehistoric nights, the human spirit ignited a blaze that would illuminate the course of history itself. In the unending twilight of a world where giants roamed and darkness stretched beyond the horizon, humanity's quest for survival was not solely a struggle against physical threats. It was also a profound journey inward, a voyage into the recesses of the mind, where the unseen forces of fear, hope, and wonder stirred the first embers of belief and spirituality. This was the birth of something intangible yet powerful, the human spirit's attempt to understand, to find meaning, and to connect with the mysteries that lay beyond the visible world. The landscape itself seemed alive with presence. Forests whispered secrets on the wind, rivers sang their ancient songs, and the flickering shadows cast by firelight danced like spirits on the walls of caves. The towering forms of dinosaurs were not merely creatures, but manifestations of forces greater than human comprehension. Their power and unpredictability inspired awe and terror, blurring the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural. Early humans sensed that the world was governed by unseen laws and beings. They perceived patterns in the cycles of day and night, the changing seasons, and the behaviors of animals. These patterns suggested order amid chaos, a web of connections that extended beyond immediate perception. To navigate this complex reality, they began to weave narratives, myths and legends that explained origins, dictated behavior, and offered guidance. Spirituality emerged as a framework for interpreting experience and managing uncertainty. The spirits of ancestors were believed to linger, watching over the living, offering protection or warning through dreams and omens. The great beasts, too, were revered and feared as spirits themselves, guardians of the land or harbingers of destruction. Relationships with these forces were cultivated through ritual, prayer, and offerings, creating a dialogue between humanity and the cosmos. Rituals became central to communal life. These ceremonies, often held around firelight in the heart of the community, blended music, dance, and symbolic acts that connected participants to the spiritual realm. Masks and body paint transformed humans into representations of animals or spirits, blurring the lines between hunter and hunted, mortal and divine. Such enactments were not mere performance. They were acts of communion and transformation, reinforcing the tribe's cohesion and resilience. Shamans or spiritual leaders emerged as intermediaries, individuals believed to possess special gifts of insight and healing. Through trance, dance, and the use of sacred plants, they journeyed into other realms to seek knowledge, protection, and guidance. Their role was both feared and revered, for they navigated the liminal spaces where life and death, seen and unseen, converged. The belief in an afterlife took root, shaped by observations of death and decay, and by dreams that suggested continued existence beyond the physical body. Burial practices became elaborate, with grave goods, tools, ornaments, food, offered to accompany the deceased on their journey. These acts reflected a profound respect for life and an enduring hope that death was a passage, not an end. Symbolism permeated every aspect of spiritual life. Totems representing clans or spirits were revered as protectors and sources of identity. Natural elements, fire, water, earth, sky, were imbued with sacred qualities, forming the foundation of a cosmology that framed human existence within a larger, interconnected universe. This worldview emphasized balance, reciprocity, and respect, guiding behavior toward harmony with nature. Dreams held special significance. In the darkness between sleep and waking, visions were interpreted as messages from spirits or ancestors, offering warnings or blessings. The practice of dream interpretation became an art, with certain individuals recognized as dreamwalkers or seers. These nocturnal insights informed decisions, from hunting strategies to social alliances. Spiritual beliefs also provided psychological shelter in a world of constant danger. By attributing meaning to suffering and uncertainty, humans found ways to cope with fear and loss. The idea of a just cosmos, where actions had consequences beyond the visible life, fostered moral codes and social order. Fear of spiritual retribution reinforced cooperation and respect within the tribe. The interplay of spirituality and survival was dynamic and adaptive. As environmental and social conditions changed, so too did beliefs and rituals. New spirits were acknowledged, old ones transformed or forgotten. The spiritual realm was a living tapestry, reflecting the evolving needs and experiences of the community. This emergence of belief was a profound milestone in human evolution. It marked the development of abstract thought, self-awareness, and the capacity for symbolic representation, hallmarks of what it means to be human. Spirituality forged a bridge between the tangible world and the vast unknown, opening paths toward art, language, and culture. Through this lens, the twilight world was not merely a battleground but a sacred space. The giants and the shadows were part of a cosmic dance, one in which humans played a vital role. Their stories, rituals, and beliefs transformed fear into reverence, chaos into order, and survival into meaning. In the quiet moments between dusk and dawn, beneath skies painted with stars unseen in the modern world, humanity reached beyond itself. It sought connection, purpose, and transcendence. And in doing so, it laid the foundations of spirituality, the eternal quest to understand the mysteries of existence and to find light in the deepest shadows. The long night of shadows and giants was beginning to wane. Through relentless struggle, unyielding ingenuity, and profound resilience, humanity was not just surviving, it was ascending. This was the dawn of dominion, a subtle yet transformative era when humans began to shift from hunted to hunter, from prey to architect of their own destiny. It was a slow revolution, marked by milestones etched into stone, bone, and memory. The giants, magnificent and terrifying, had ruled the land for epochs, their thunderous footsteps shaping the very earth. Yet even the mightiest creatures are subject to the inexorable forces of change, climate shifts, dwindling resources, and the increasing pressure of a cunning new competitor. As humans refined their tools, tactics, and social bonds, they began to carve niches in ecosystems once dominated by prehistoric titans. Strategic hunting became more sophisticated. Coordinated drives and ambushes were no longer desperate gambits, but planned operations. By exploiting terrain, weather, and animal behavior, humans could isolate and bring down even the largest beasts. The combination of long-range weapons and close combat tools ensured adaptability, while the sharing of meat fostered social cohesion and reciprocal alliances within and between tribes. This mastery over the environment extended beyond the hunt. Early forms of landscape management emerged, controlled burns to encourage the growth of favored plants, clearing of underbrush to ease movement, and the creation of pathways to facilitate trade and migration. Humans began to see themselves not as passive inhabitants, but as active participants shaping the world around them. Settlement patterns reflected this new agency. Groups established semi-permanent camps and villages in resource-rich areas, often near water and game trails. These hubs became centers of culture and innovation, where knowledge accumulated and was passed down with increasing complexity. Pottery, weaving, and the crafting of specialized tools blossomed, reflecting a growing sophistication in daily life. The development of agriculture, still in its infancy, hinted at a profound shift. Cultivating plants and domesticating animals would eventually redefine human existence, anchoring communities to the land and sparking the growth of civilizations. This nascent stewardship of nature signaled a new relationship, not just surviving with the earth, but cultivating it. Social structures grew more complex, with emerging hierarchies and roles that balanced leadership with communal decision-making. Elders and shamans held revered positions, guiding not only practical affairs but spiritual and moral codes. Trade networks expanded, linking distant peoples through the exchange of goods, ideas, and customs, weaving an intricate tapestry of human connection. The spiritual beliefs that had sustained early humans evolved alongside their growing dominion. Rituals became more elaborate, encompassing celebrations of the hunt, rites of passage, and ceremonies marking the cycles of nature. These practices reinforced group identity, social cohesion, and the ethical frameworks necessary for cooperation amid increasing social complexity. Language flourished as a tool for coordination, storytelling, and teaching. The rich oral traditions preserved histories, myths, and practical knowledge, embedding cultural values and collective memory. Symbols and proto-writing systems began to emerge, hinting at the future development of written language and record-keeping. Despite these advances, the ascent was neither smooth nor assured. The environment remained harsh and unpredictable. Giants still roamed, their presence a constant reminder of nature's power. Competition with other human groups sometimes erupted into conflict, driven by scarcity or territorial disputes. Disease, injury, and starvation posed ever-present threats. Yet the cumulative force of human adaptation was undeniable. Physical evolution favored endurance, dexterity, and cognitive capacity, while cultural evolution accelerated the pace of change. The interplay of biology and culture forged a species capable of transcending the limits of instinct alone. This dawn of dominion was a crucible in which humanity forged the foundations of civilization. It was a testament to the indomitable spirit that, faced with overwhelming odds, refused to yield. The echoes of this era resonate in every stone tool, every story told by firelight, every bond of kinship and community. In claiming their place amid the giants, humans did not simply conquer, they transformed. They became creators, caretakers, and chroniclers of a world in flux. And in that transformation lay the promise of a future where the flickering shadows of twilight would give way to the bright dawn of human history. As the relentless march of time pressed onward, the world that had once echoed with the thunderous footsteps of giants began to fall silent. The great titans that had shaped the landscapes, dominated the skies, and ruled the waters were fading into the annals of memory. This was the final twilight of the dinosaurs, a period marked by gradual decline, cataclysmic upheavals, and the inexorable reshaping of life on Earth. The causes of this extinction were complex and multifaceted, woven from the threads of cosmic fate and terrestrial transformation. Catastrophic events, massive volcanic eruptions, shifting tectonic plates, and a cataclysmic asteroid impact rained destruction across the globe. These upheavals altered climates, blanketed skies with dust and ash, and disrupted ecosystems on a scale beyond comprehension. The giants, magnificent though they were, could not withstand this sudden and profound change. Yet the extinction was not an instantaneous event, but a drawn-out process. Species dwindled over millennia, populations fragmented, and habitats shrank under the pressure of environmental instability. The giants' once vast dominions became fragmented islands of survival, isolated refuges where the struggle against extinction played out in slow motion. For humanity, these changes were both a peril and an opportunity. The disappearance of the giants opened vast new territories, fertile grounds for expansion and innovation. Prey animals adapted and multiplied, altering food webs and enabling human populations to grow and diversify. The ecological vacuum left by the giants was gradually filled by mammals and other creatures more closely allied to humans in the evolutionary tree. This transition was neither simple nor devoid of conflict. The shifting balance of nature brought new challenges: competition with other predators, novel diseases, and the demands of adapting to rapidly changing climates. Yet human resilience and adaptability allowed them to thrive where giants could not. The memory of the giants endured in the stories told by firelight, in the myths and legends that shaped human culture. These narratives preserved the awe and respect inspired by creatures that had once dwarfed human existence. They became symbols of power, mystery, and the sublime forces of nature, echoes of a past both terrifying and magnificent. The extinction of the dinosaurs was a crucible that forged a new world. It marked the end of an era and the beginning of another, a world increasingly shaped by humans and the creatures that shared their fate. It was a moment when survival shifted from the realm of titanic struggle to the subtle dance of ecosystems balanced on the edge of change. In the silent spaces once filled by giant footsteps, humanity's voice grew stronger. The fires they tended, the tools they crafted, and the stories they told became the legacy of a species rising from the twilight of extinction toward the dawn of civilization. The echoes of the giants' final twilight serve as a profound reminder of nature's power and fragility, and of humanity's enduring journey through the shadows and into the light. As the shadows recede and the long night yields to the gentle light of dawn, humanity stands at the threshold of a profound understanding, a recognition of its roots entwined with the giants, its emergence from the twilight, and its responsibility toward the world it now inhabits. The story of humans and dinosaurs coexisting is not merely a tale of survival, but a narrative rich with lessons about resilience, adaptation, and the intricate web of life that binds all creatures across time. The coexistence of humans and dinosaurs, though fleeting in the grand tapestry of Earth's history, represents a pivotal chapter in the unfolding drama of life. It is a testament to the indomitable spirit of a species that, faced with overwhelming forces, carved a path not through brute domination but through harmony, respect, and relentless ingenuity. This delicate balance, between fear and fascination, survival and reverence, shaped the human journey in ways still echoing through our collective consciousness. Reflecting on this era, we see the roots of human culture sprouting amid a world both terrifying and sublime. The tales told around flickering fires, the rituals honoring ancestors and spirits, the art etched into cave walls. These are more than relics of a distant past. They are the foundation stones of our shared humanity. They speak of a time when humans first began to see themselves as part of a larger whole, connected to the land, the beasts, and the cycles that govern existence. The legacy of coexistence also challenges modern perceptions. In an age dominated by technological prowess and scientific certainty, the story reminds us that knowledge is not merely accumulated data but lived experience, wisdom born from interaction with the natural world. The bone hunters' mastery of strategy, their innovations in tool-making, and their spiritual reflections reveal a sophisticated relationship with nature that transcends simplistic narratives of conquest. This history urges us to reconsider our place within the environment. Just as early humans learned to navigate a world shared with giants, so too must we navigate a world shaped by our own impact, where the survival of countless species now depends on our actions. The echoes of the past call us to cultivate humility, stewardship, and a deeper awareness of the interconnectedness that sustains life. In embracing this legacy, we find inspiration for the challenges ahead. The adaptability and creativity that allowed humans to thrive amid dinosaurs are qualities still vital in the face of contemporary crises. Climate change, biodiversity loss, and environmental degradation demand responses grounded in both scientific understanding and profound respect for the living world. The lessons of coexistence offer a blueprint for resilience rooted in collaboration, innovation, and balance. Moreover, the story of humans and dinosaurs coexisting enriches our imagination and sense of wonder. It invites us to explore the mysteries of time, evolution, and the endless dance of life and death. It reminds us that beneath the layers of myth and science lies a shared narrative, a human story intertwined with the rhythms of Earth itself. As we stand beyond the twilight, we carry forward the legacy of those who came before, who faced the vast unknown with courage, who forged bonds that transcended fear, and who ignited the flame of civilization amid the echoes of giants. Their journey is a beacon, illuminating our path as we seek to live not in dominion over nature, but in harmony with its enduring rhythms. In this reflection lies hope, that through understanding and reverence, humanity can honor the past, navigate the present, and nurture a future where all life thrives. The coexistence of humans and dinosaurs is not just a story of survival. It is a timeless testament to the resilience of life, the power of connection, and the enduring quest for meaning amid the vastness of existence.